Good evening, class. This is Professor Hill Cook with Chapter 15 review. Chapter 15 is called Why Texas Politics? What is Texas politics? So you have a history of, there's three things: individualism, moralism, and traditionalism. In 1929, in the 41st legislature, it was decided that a government is required, that kids need to take government class for 6th and 7th grade students. That was determined in 1929 so that people, students, young people, could get an idea of how our government is and how it functions. So our politics in Texas is that it is the art or science of government or governing. What is politics? Politics itself, this is the definition of politics. Politics itself is the art or science of government or governing. What is government? Government is the act or process of governing, especially the control and administration of public policy. So government is supposed to provide public policy. What is public policy? Any government decision that affects the entire society. That's public policy. So as you're watching these debates, and I hope you've caught one of the state debates between M.J. Hager and John Cornyn, who is running for our Senate seats for the state of Texas. I hope you caught their debate because they're talking about public policy. They're talking about how they will vote in Washington about things that are public policy. And those things are what we are governed by. There are 4 conditions to democracy. 1, political equity. Opinions are counted as equal no matter what the preference. Participation. A majority of participants are engaged in the political process. I just stated 4 conditions for democracy. As you continue to grow and learn more about government and how we are operating as a nation, here are the 4 things you should be looking for to determine if we are operating as a true democracy. The third one is non-tyranny. What does that mean? That the fundamental rights of citizens would not be infringed upon. Some may say that our rights are being infringed upon right now. Deliberation, when citizens have the ability to talk about issues or candidates and make certain all alternatives have been put forth before a decision. So when you look at what's happening right now in our U.S. Senate with the nomination of Amy Barrett for the Supreme Court, that is an issue because it is not making sure that we have had the opportunity to talk about this particular candidate because of the rushness of the Senate to confirm her. And so that's part of our democracy that is being attacked right now. So there are 4 conditions. Political equity, do we have that? Does everybody really have access to voting when you're closing down voting places, limiting hours of voting, people standing in line for 11 and 12 hours to cast their vote, removing polling mailboxes where people could drop their mail in, not allowing mail-in voting? Are we really allowing equal access to this political process? Participation. Are we allowing our people to participate if we're limiting their access? So political equity, participation, non-tyranny, and deliberation. Those are the 4 conditions that make up a democracy. In Texas, we have 5 basic ideas about how we operate and who we are. Individualism, that's 1. A part of American creed that supports the idea of self-worth. Number 2, liberty. We allow people to make their own choices. We really do. We may not always agree with them, but we allow people to make their own choices without interfering. Equality, the most problematic because the meaning of equality differs per person. Equality is a hard one because we don't always like sharing. And so what is political equity and then political equality and equality of opportunity? The goal is to have opportunity, access. What we know is that when we all have the same access, then we all do well. What happens in our nation right now and what this pandemic has shown us is that we are not all equal, that we have different degrees of what we mean by equality. We're finding out that systems that are in place are not available to everyone at the same level. So we don't have equality. Constitutionalism is another a basic idea. And then democracy. In democracy, what does it say? The people rule. So we are the people. How do we rule? We show up to vote. How do we know that our vote is being counted? And that our vote is being valued? Because we hold those people that we elect accountable. We show up at their town halls. We send emails when we're not happy with a vote that they cast. We call and ask what are their intentions on fixing this particular issue in your neighborhood or your community. And so that's how we get change. And that's how we hold the people accountable that we elect. We, the people, have the power. But what we've done is we've allowed ourselves for our power to be taken away from us simply because we won't show up to vote consistently. And that is how you win the battle, is you show up to vote consistently. Your voice matters consistently. So there are forms of democracy. There's the classical democracy. This is important to the individual. There's the majoritarian democracy, where the majority rules. And then there's the pluralist democracy, where we divide the power among the many. And so those are the different forms of democracy. And on some level, we have the majority rule in some cases based on votes, but not always. We won't talk about the Electoral College. But we divide the power among many in terms of the people that we elect to represent us. They should be reflective of our values and what we, the people, desire. And so we have those forms of democracy. What we find is that there's a group that determines that only a small group of people need to be in this process. And that's called the elitist challenge, that a small number of people control all the decisions that are being made. And so the reason why we are struggling right now as a nation, as it relates to how we are responding in this time we find ourselves in, is because we allowed a small group of people to speak for the masses. Every time there's been a major issue, the majority of Americans wanted to see something different happen. But it was that small group of 100 senators or the 435 members of the House that spoke for the 330 million people. It's 330 million people in America, at least. And 535 people are making the decisions for 330 million. Something about that doesn't quite add up, right? So how do we fix that? We fix that by voting and holding them accountable, because that's the system we have right now. And so who participates? And we'll talk a little bit about this later in terms of who are the voters, who are people that actually show up to the polls. Right now, we are in a high political season. Election is going on right now. Early voting ends on October 30th, and then the elections is on November 3rd. So we will make some decisions as a nation. We will make decisions as the state of Texas as to who we want to represent us. What are your top 5 to 10 issues that are most important to you? What are they? Is it healthcare? Is it education? Is it criminal justice reform? Is it immigration? Is it the climate, environment issues? What are your top 5 issues? What are important? Is it infrastructure? Is it Social Security? Is it jobs? What is it? Only you know the answer of that. And you have to vote based on those things that are most important to you. And if we do that consistently, then we will see the change that we are hoping for in our political process. So, chapter 15, understanding our Texas politics, the democracy, what are those conditions that affect our democracy, what type of ideas do we have, and then what are the different forms of democracy. Once again, this information is found on the website. It is your PowerPoint slides that you can see on the website. I just like to give you a verbal, because sometimes we read stuff and it doesn't quite make sense. So if you have any questions about anything, please reach out and email me and let me know. Thank you and have a good evening.